If we're going to go with that traditional test, regardless of if it's a 1 by 25 or a 5 by 5 style, we can gamify that and make it just that little bit more engaging to partly boost that engagement and motivation, but also try and reduce that anxiety and that test stress that we often see from students. And there's plenty of psychology out there to suggest that the more anxious or stressed you are about something, the less that your brain is actually working effectively. So your results are always going to be lower than your true capacity. If we can alleviate that to some degree, then our students' results are going to improve, the attitude towards the test is going to improve, and their levels of anxiety are going to decrease. I talk about this more in the gamification course, but we can do simple things like adding little icons and symbology to show things like progress. So in this case, colors are a great thing to indicate complexity. I can start with the green and I'm gradually, sort of subtly suggesting that it's increasing complexity by changing the colors. I can add these little gamification icons like the little angry bird, the level up, the achievement unlocked, and I'll show these in physical examples shortly. The progress bar, having a question 1 of 4 is really, really useful. It links to the psychology phenomena, the endowed progress effect, and this whole sort of sunk cost fallacy psychology principle as well, where if we feel like we are a fair way in or we know how far we've got to go, it can be much more supportive of us to continue and stay motivated than if we don't. For example, if I'm only 1 page into a test and I'm really struggling, if I then just go, well, how big is this test? And I look and immediately I see it's 6 pages, I'm already in a pretty bad emotional state. I might be really anxious. I'm really stressed. I feel like I can't even get the first page. It doesn't matter if those 6 pages are 1 question per page. I'm probably not going to spend that much time to identify. I just do a quick flick and go, this is 6 pages. Just like your students are going to ask before every test, how many questions are in the test? How many pages is it? They are trying to develop this psychological response on, is this a big thing or is it not? If they then see question 1 of 6 or something like that, not so much page 1 of 6, but question 1 of 6, once they're up to question 2 or 3, you're already like, I'm nearly done. I'm halfway there. So it can be really motivating. I would apply the same concept to lessons, to slides, but I'll talk about that in a different course so that students can know where they're tracking and where they're up to. Another thing that we can do is we can sort of change the formality and the appearance of the front of the test. So rather than just having this plain, boring white page that just says like, here's the topic, here's the test, put your name in it, and you create that atmosphere of like, write your name at the top, no one turn the page until I say so. We're creating a pretty tense atmosphere there. By adding simple things like choosing a title. It's just a silly thing, but it creates that slight distraction for the students. They get to pick, do I want to be Her Excellency? Do I want to be the Vice Chancellor? And the kids get a little kick out of this. It takes that little bit of stress away, helps distract them, helps take away the seriousness of this assessment and go, this is just a bit of fun to assess your understanding. Another great tool is things like avatars. Put a bunch of little avatar characters on the front page and they have to circle who they want to be. So they're choosing their title, they're choosing their character, just like you would in a game. These are really easy to get. You can just go on Google and search like avatar or characters and there'll be lists of them. These ones are Fortnite characters. You'll see more examples as we go through of other styles, but the avatars can be a really great thing just to make your test that little bit more fun and immersive. This is an example of the front page of a maths test. You can see that this looks very different to your typical cover sheet for a test. As simple as giving it headings and logos to make it feel like this is an authentic thing from NASA. Calling it, in this case it was linked to a project unit, so it was called the Orion Project, but the Orion Mathematics Accreditation Test, I referred to it as the OMAT throughout the course. You can see the avatar selection, so these are cartoon characters from Stranger Things. They're putting their player name, so rather than, again, just a boring little text box that says student name, we can have things like player name. And then I've got that gamified icon such as the press start, which even though it doesn't do anything, just changes the feel of the test. So what about things like formula sheets within a test? Well, what if we call them things like a cheat code? And all I've done is I've put a different heading on top and I've called it cheat codes. These are just my normal formulae. and I've got an icon of an old Super Nintendo controller. This, again, has a very gamified, much more relaxed vibe than the typical test that we might see. If we look at the questions themselves, you can see some of these gamification icons. I've started with just your ordinary test. So this does not involve reinventing your test entirely and starting from scratch. You can take what you've got and just add simple little things, like little icons along the way. You can add little colored arrows, again, to indicate progress. I haven't done the question 1 of 4 style here, but I've used my arrows to sort of push them along the way. And the color coding is indicative of how complex the question is. When we get to the end, you can see, just like you would in a game, we've got the boss level. This is the hardest question. It's pretty clear from the symbols, the colors that I'm using, that this is a hard question. And then right at the end, I've got that little game hook of like the quick game button, which again, clearly isn't working, but it creates that sense of like, this is sort of a game that you're playing, not just a paper test. Another example, this was a digital assessment that my students did online. You could just as easily print this off and do it, but I just did this digitally. We've got the same concept. So in this case, they were circling rank. Here's another example of avatar characters that students can select. And then when we get into the questions, rather than having question 1 in this case, this assessment, this test was a story. So this was all about space. So in level 3, they're talking about they need to enter coordinates into a ship's computer to defragment from a previous error. So we're really just creating a storyline, and the question is a problem to be solved in a scenario now, not just a solve for X or find the coordinates of these scenarios. And I can do simple things like add the colors. I've got the little 404 error, which links to my story and the heading of this question.